vaccinated. But that is what they're working on, and we're going to go over exactly what the study was, where the study was, what they were vaccinating these people against, and what that might mean for our future when it comes to being mandated to be vaccinated. Also, we do have a guest on tonight, Joe Allen. He is the author of Dark Aeon, or Dark Eon, I think is how you actually pronounce it, even though it starts with an A. And he's going to be talking about transhumanism. He's actually a transhumanism expert. You might know him from Bannon's War Room. And he really gives a dystopian view of what the future holds as we develop AI. A very smart view. So you definitely want to hear from him about that, because it's not the same old that you hear from other people. So that is going to be showing up. He's going to be showing up later on in the show tonight. All right. So let's first talk about Trump has been indicted again, this time for the events of January 6th and also for questioning the election. This is really, let's just go through the indictment, the charges. This is insane in my viewpoint. I don't understand why Hillary Clinton is not also indicted. If Donald Trump is going to be indicted for sowing misinformation or defrauding the United States or telling lies about the election, I am not understanding why Hillary Clinton isn't also being charged. But that is because we know the reasons, because it's a partisan situation right now. They're just doing everything they can to stop Donald Trump. And that is why Donald Trump has been indicted for mishandling of classified documents, but not Joe Biden, not Mike Pence, not Hillary Clinton. This is why Donald Trump is being indicted for defrauding the United States, for claiming that the election was stolen from him, but not Hillary Clinton, who propagated Russiagate and got mainstream media on board and defrauded, if you want to call it that, millions upon millions of Americans for years, making people believe that Russia stole the election. I don't understand why she's not being indicted. But let's go over what they charged him with today. 4 charges against, this is the January 6th indictment, essentially. Count 1, conspiracy to defraud the United States. 2 counts related to efforts to obstruct the vote certification proceedings. And 1 count of conspiracy to violate civil rights, which they're claiming was when he was questioning state by state the various different vote counts. They're saying that that was a conspiracy to violate civil rights. And they're saying that obviously the 2 counts related to efforts to obstruct the vote certification proceedings had to do with January 6th, that day of, that they're saying that he was, even though he was saying to the protesters, go peacefully protest, he wasn't saying break in there and disrupt things and stop the vote. He never said that. He actually never said that. And yet they're trying to claim that he was responsible for attempting to obstruct the vote certification proceedings. And the 1 count of conspiracy to defraud the United States is just that they're claiming that, the overall, he was trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election, and therefore that was a conspiracy to defraud the United States. Even though there was a challenge between Al Gore and George Bush in that election, there was Hillary Clinton claiming that Russian was behind Donald Trump winning and launched an investigation that cost taxpayers millions of dollars. But no, it's Donald Trump who said, I don't believe the election was fair. He stood at a podium. He said, we're protesting. And then he challenged elections like many others have done. Stacey Abrams did it. George Bush and Al Gore. I mean, the list goes on. It is actually part of the democratic process to challenge elections. If you're not allowed to challenge elections, then we are not a democracy. And in fact, that is the real scary part about this. The scary part about Trump being indicted today over these different charges is not about Trump and what they're trying to do to him. It's what they're trying to do to us. And we have to look at it this way. It's not about Donald Trump. Maybe you hate Donald Trump. You think the guy's a big fraudster and total egomaniac. I mean, that's what I believe about the guy. I never voted for the guy. I think he's an egomaniac, but I see what they're doing to him. I'm not blind. And I see that ultimately it's not what they're doing to him. It's what they're doing to us. They're telling us, don't you dare challenge the establishment. If you do, we will come after you. If you're not part of the approved political list of players who can run for office and you challenge the establishment, then you are potentially we're going to come after you. Don't you dare. If you challenge the election results election results that we like, if you don't like those election results and you want to recount, you might go to jail. That is not a democracy. If you say, protest and show them that you're unhappy, you could go to jail. It is what they're doing to us. Donald Trump will be gone at some point. Whether he wins this next election or not, he is going to, one way or the other, be a thing of the past at some point, whether he serves a second term and then his 4 years are up and that totals 8 and he can no longer be president ever again, or he gets old and dies like everybody. I mean, I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying everybody, gets old and goes away and becomes a historical figure. That could become, so either way, the guy's going to be gone. And when he's gone, we're left with the remnants of what they're doing to him. We're left with the knowledge that if you speak up, if you challenge any of these things, you could potentially be thrown in jail. So those are the charges against him. We're going to read through some of the indictments so you understand how ridiculous this whole thing is. So the grand jury charges that at all times material to this indictment on or about the dates and at the approximate time stated below. So the introduction to this indictment. The defendant, Donald J. Trump, was the 45th president of the United States and a candidate for re-election in 2020. The defendant lost the 2020 presidential election. Despite having lost, the defendant was determined to remain in power. So for more than 2 months following Election Day on November 3rd, 2020, the defendant spread lies, and there has been outcome detrimental fraud in the election that he had actually won. These claims were false, and the defendant knew that they were false, but the defendant repeated and widely disseminated them anyway to make his knowingly false claims appear legitimate, create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger, and erode public faith in the administration of the election. Swap out Hillary Clinton. Swap it out. Why is she not being indicted? The defendant, Hillary Clinton, was not the 45th president or the 44th president of the United States. She was a candidate in 2016, and she lost the 2016 presidential election. Despite having lost, the defendant, Hillary Clinton, was determined to remain in power. So for more than 4, 5, 6 years following the election day on November 3rd or whatever it was on maybe November 4th, 2016, the defendant spread lies that Russia had a detrimental outcome on the election, that she had actually won. These claims were false. The defendant knew they were false. She actually helped spread those false lies by even paying for a Steele dossier. But the defendant, Hillary Clinton, repeated and widely decimated them anyway to make her knowingly false claims appear legitimate. She created an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger and eroded public faith in the administration of the election. You see the hypocrisy here? Because that fits her completely. So they go on to say in this indictment, the defendant had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome detrimental fraud during the election that he had won. He was also entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful appropriate means, such as by seeking recounts or audits of the popular vote in states or filing lawsuits challenging ballots and procedure. Indeed, in many cases, the defendant did pursue these methods of contesting the election results. His efforts to change the outcome in any state through recounts, audits, or legal challenges were uniformly unsuccessful. So they're saying there, he has the right to make these claims. Like every American, you can publicly say what you want about the election. You can publicly say that you won. You can even formally challenge the results and actually say you want to recount. You're allowed to do that. But this is where they say then he committed the crime. They say shortly after Election Day, the defendant also pursued unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election results. In so doing, the defendant perpetrated 3 criminal conspiracies. The first one, a conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty. Now remember, replace Donald Trump with Hillary Clinton, and you get the same thing. By using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government in violation of 18 U.S.C. 371. Now, with Hillary Clinton, you could claim that when the Electoral College went to vote, there was a demand at that point for electors to defect. If you remember this, there was actually calls for defectors in the electoral process, in the electoral college process. Now that's legal. They can actually do that. And I suppose what they're trying to say is the difference between Trump and Hillary Clinton is that though an elector can, at that time of voting, can defect and not vote with what the state requires them to vote, however the state requires, that the difference is that that's legal, and that the storming of the Capitol, in which there was an obstruction of the actual vote, there was like a violent uprising that was there to disrupt that proceeding, that is why he's now a criminal. But he didn't do that. Last I checked, he wasn't there. He never told anybody to go inside. In fact, he told people to remain peaceful. So now many of us did not like the events that happened that day, but nonetheless, it would be in bad faith to hold him responsible for that when he never said, go do this thing. He did not conspire. He did not say, do it. He did not encourage it. It's just that the people who happened to really like him, and probably a lot of people like, I don't know, undercover FBI agents who didn't like him, ended up being the ones who did this crime, that committed the crime. He did not commit the crime, but they're saying, well, but they committed the crime because they loved you, so therefore you are responsible for the crime. I mean, imagine the implications of that for all of us. They're saying B, a conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede the January 6th congressional proceeding at which the collected results of the presidential election are counted and certified. So this is the certification proceeding in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1512. Okay, so that's almost the same exact thing. And that's why he's got maybe 2 counts on that one. And then C, they're saying a conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted in violation of 18 U.S.C. 241. So that one, they're claiming that he committed a conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted because he was questioning the votes in states. He was saying these votes are legitimate, these votes are not legitimate. Like if you're going to be challenging a vote count in a state, then you would be saying those things. You would say, I don't believe that these votes were legitimate. I believe that these are fraudulent votes, which you should be allowed to say because what if they are, right? So you should be allowed to say that. So he says, I'm not sure about these votes. These ones shouldn't be counted, or these ones weren't counted and they should be counted. And they're saying that this is a violation against a person's civil right to vote, civil liberties to vote, because he was claiming that some votes shouldn't have been counted that were counted. So I don't understand how that's a crime, because plenty of people say we believe that there are some votes that shouldn't be counted for whatever reason that might be. You should be legally allowed to say that without being indicted of criminal charges because they say, well, you're interfering with a person's right to vote. No, he didn't physically grab their ballot and tear it up. He didn't say he wasn't the Secretary of State or the secretary. Who was it? Who does that in each state? I think it's the Secretary of State for each state, right? That counts and certifies the votes. So he's not the person. That person could potentially be indicted for that crime if they literally stop the vote count. Maybe a vote counter at one of the precincts could actually be charged with that crime if they refuse to count certain votes. I could see that, but where was Donald Trump during that? All he said is, I don't think some of those votes should have been counted. I think some of them are illegitimate. And now he's being indicted for a crime. Guys, where are we at in this country? This is not good. This is not good. So that's the indictment against him. This is, again, the third indictment. Again, if you remember, he's pled not guilty at this point to the June charges. There were 37 felony counts related to classified information and obstruction of justice. So he's got that one that he's dealing with. And apparently there's a trial date set for next May. So this next coming May in 2024. He's also pled not guilty to 34 counts of falsifying business records in a Manhattan criminal court. So this one is not federal. This is a local New York crime. The first one is a federal crime. And the other one is related to Stormy Daniels, if you remember the payout money of $130,000. They're claiming that he conducted a catch and kill scheme. And then he's got this current indictment now saying that his free speech and his challenging of the election is criminal. He's also facing, so there's more indictments probably coming in. He's also facing separate inquiries related to his alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election in Georgia. So these are state specific. And Yeah, so he's got a lot of legal troubles that they're throwing him in. They're trying to get him. They're trying to also drain his election coffers on paying for attorneys, which is what's happening. His PACs that are his official elections not paying for this, but he's got PACs that are, and they're being drained just supporting legal fees because they do believe that their candidate is under attack by the establishment. And it's hard to think that there's anything other than that going on, that this is an attempt, ironically, to thwart the election, the 2024 election, to violate American civil liberties and right to vote, to defraud the American people. I mean, ironically, that is what they're doing by doing this. They're doing the very thing they're accusing him of. Now, let's quickly move on to Joe Biden and the crimes that were, well, let's talk about the testimony that happened yesterday. This is Devin Archer. He is a former Hunter Biden business partner. He worked with him in Ukraine deals and China deals. He testified behind closed doors. We do not have the transcript. We don't know everything that was said. We're just getting snippets in the news from the people that were there, from a couple of congressmen, a Democrat and a Republican, who were there, and they're kind of being chatty Cathys about it. But otherwise, we don't know what was actually said. We're waiting on that transcript. But he did testify yesterday behind closed doors to the House Oversight Committee. He was subpoenaed to do so. So he showed up and he says, I'm just going to tell the truth. That's all I can really do, and you make of it what you will. In fact, his attorney said, we are aware that all sides are claiming victory following Mr. Archer's voluntary interview today. But all Devin Archer did was exactly what he said he would do: show up and answer the questions put to him honestly and completely. He said, Mr. Archer shared the truth with the committee, and we will leave it to them and the others to decide what to do with it. Now, according to Democrats, Devin Archer didn't really say anything too damning. They claim that what he said was that he didn't say that Joe Biden himself was party to any of his son's business deals, but that instead Hunter Biden was trying to sell the illusion that he was providing access to his dad when he was not. So he was personally capitalizing on the fact that his father was vice president of the United States. He was selling that access without having actual access. So they're saying he was just selling the illusion of access. He didn't really have access. However, according to Republicans, it was a different hearing altogether, that Devin Archer actually confessed that Joe Biden did meet and speak with more than 20 times various business associates of Hunter Biden and Devin Archer's. That Hunter Biden would be sitting there with a business associate they're trying to make a deal with, that they're going to get paid, I don't know, like from the Burisma deal, $83,000 per month without having any experience or any reason to hold those titles of being on the board, except for the fact that, hey, I'm the vice president of the United States, kid. That's the only expertise that Hunter Biden had. I think we all can understand that and agree that that's the truth of the situation. The question is whether or not Hunter actually had access to his father, whether he was actually peddling that access and making money on it, or if he was just selling the illusion of this. Like, did Joe Biden actually do anything to help his son in these business deals? It's hard to imagine he didn't, quite frankly. This is his dad. He talked to his dad every single day. I talk to my dad every day. He talks to his, and my dad, by the way, gives me feedback on this show. He talks to me. I mean, he absolutely, he's like involved in my business. So why wouldn't then his dad be involved in his business dealings, giving him advice, hearing him, even then favoring maybe some legislation or maybe actions like, I don't know, getting rid of a Ukrainian prosecutor, if that's going to benefit his son somehow? It's hard to imagine that his father wasn't also looking out for his son's best interest. It's hard to imagine that he wasn't somehow connected. What Devin Archer didn't do was give that direct evidence, but he did say that Joe Biden spoke on the phone with these business associates more than 20 times, though he didn't say anything but niceties. So Devin Archer said all he said were niceties. Hello, how are you? Nice to hear, whatever. But that doesn't mean that behind closed doors, Hunter and Joe weren't discussing things privately in their home. And then Hunter was going back to those business associates and saying, well, my pops says, this, that, and the other. I mean, that is a very real possibility. And I think Devin Archer's testimony, though, in my opinion, wasn't totally, the nail in the coffin. it certainly was enough of a nail to say we need some investigation. We need some investigation. And there maybe could be some more information that comes out that proves that, yes, in fact, Joe Biden was colluding with his son to peddle his influence and make millions upon millions of dollars for skill sets that Hunter Biden did not possess. So that is where we're at on that. Now let's move on. Gonzalo Lira is an American-Chilean journalist who is now on the run. He actually spent 9.5 weeks in jail, in a Ukrainian jail, for free speech. So definitely they did not like the Ukrainian government criminalized being critical of the Ukraine war. They criminalized anything that seemed like you were favoring Russia or understood Russia's position in the invasion. So they criminalized that speech. Gonzalo Lira has a YouTube channel. He was making videos that were more leaning towards understanding Russia, being maybe even more on Russia's side. And so what? You should be allowed to be on either side of any war. I know certainly here as an American, I'm often against the wars that America goes around and wages with the world. So imagine that being a crime, and imagine being told that you're going to be locked up in jail if you criticize the government and the government's war. So that's what happened to Gonzalo Lira. He's now out. So he spent 9.5 weeks. We had his father on the show a couple of times. He pled with the American government to help get his son out. His son is an American. He cried on the show. It was very emotional. And luckily now Gonzalo is out. But it comes with consequences. He cannot stay in Ukraine. He needs to run. If he doesn't run, he says that they will catch him. That he's scheduled actually to go to court next Wednesday for his actual trial. So he was just being held. They've charged him. They kind of let him out on bail or something. And he's supposed to reappear Wednesday. He says that if he goes to court, he has been told with no uncertain terms that he will be convicted, that he will be held, that he will be found guilty, and that the sentence is 5 to 8 years in jail. Because of that, Gonzalo Lira decided to run, and he's now on his way to Hungary. He's seeking asylum there. He might actually be there as we speak right now, unless he said the Kiev regime, he says, I'm either going to cross the border and make it to Hungary, or I'm going to get caught by the Kiev regime, and I'm going to be going to a labor camp is essentially where they would send him if he's convicted or when he is convicted. So he did a series of tweets. He also did a series of videos. You can watch the full videos on his YouTube channel. We do have some clips for you, but let's start off with some of his tweets. He says, right now, this was yesterday that he put these out there. He says, right now, I'm about to try to get out of Ukraine and seek political asylum in Hungary. Either I'll cross the border and make it to safety, or I'll be disappeared by the Kiev regime. This is what happened to me over the past 3 months. He says, on May 1st, I was arrested for my YouTube videos. The photos of my arrest are pretty funny. Morning bedhead made me look like a character out of Dr. Seuss. My crime was making videos critical of the West and their proxy regime in Kiev and how they are destroying Ukraine. Attached to these tweets is the full indictment against me, both the original Ukrainian and English translation. As you can see, even the prosecutor admits I committed no crime against property or any person, and I certainly provided no aid or intelligence to the Russians. It says, my indictment explicitly states that all I did was discuss publicly known facts about the war, the epitome of free speech in a democracy. But Zelensky's Ukraine is no democracy. It is a thieving, corrupt, murderous gangster regime pretending to be a polite Western democracy. And he goes and he shows the various different indictment forms that you can read if you go onto his Twitter account, which is Gonzalo Lira 1968. He then says, once arrested, I was given documentation assuring me that I was guaranteed the right to contact my lawyers and loved ones as well as post bail. In fact, I was blocked from calling anyone, even my lawyers, and I was not permitted to post bail, though I had the cash to do so. In other words, the formalities were carried out scrupulously while judicial and ethical grotesqueries ruled. That's Zelensky's Ukraine. That's what his thuggish regime cares about, the perception of democracy and the rule of law so as to mask the sordid, corrupt reality. And he says that's why they relentlessly persecute anyone who tells the truth about this war. I'm not the only so-called propagandist the Kiev regime has thrown in prison. It's also why they shoot any AFU soldier who dares retreat. That's why the AFU losses are so horrific but hidden. As you can see by the indictment, the video I made that really chapped their ass was, quote, Ukraine, a primer, which gives the historical background to the conflict, where I state outright that this invasion wasn't out of the blue, that indeed it was provoked by the Kiev regime. So he was released. He says in his video that he was released July 6th, that he spent 9.5 weeks in the prison. He was released July 6th, and he's now realizing there's no way he's going to win in court, and he's supposed to appear in court next week, so he is on the run and seeking asylum in Hungary. Let's go ahead and play some of the video clips that he posted. These are just little snippets of it, and he's posted about 45 minutes worth of video on his YouTube channel that you can go and watch if you would like. But this is the first one. He talks about being jailed for free speech.
These are the options that I have. Since I know I'm going to be found guilty and I will be sent to a prison labor camp, and because of events that happened in prison where I was extorted for a sizable amount of money, I will be sent to a prison labor camp come my court date. That's inevitable. Okay? And there won't be any suspended sentence and there won't be any mercy, all because of my YouTube videos. I mean, I want to emphasize this, you know. In the indictment, if you read it, you will see that the prosecutor himself says that I committed no crime against any person or property, and that my crimes are literally speech crimes, saying things that the government doesn't like. Ukraine is supposed to be this big democracy that it wants to join the European Union and because it has European values, European democratic values. What higher value does a democracy have than free speech? My case is all about free speech. And I spent, 2 months and change in a maximum security prison. And by the way, when I say, okay, well, let me finish that point. I spent 2 months and change in a maximum security prison over things that I said, opinions I gave regarding publicly available information that is undisputed. This is the epitome of free speech, and yet I went to prison for it, and I will likely go 5 to 8 years to a prison labor camp where, by the way, everybody in the CISO prison, the investigative prison where I was at, none of them wanted to go to that labor camp because they all said it's a death sentence.
So there he is talking about free speech. And, you know, look, Ukraine's learning from America, right? It wants to be like America, and it's learning from America. I mean, here we are going after a former president of the United States for his speech. So why not go after a YouTuber, thinks the Ukrainians. Here he is talking about his time being tortured in the jail.
Let me backtrack a little. While I was in CISO, I was extorted for a great deal of money. $70,000 to be precise. Now, how did this happen? Well, through various clues and various information that I acquired, which I intend to describe in detail in a book about the whole thing, if I live long enough to write that book. But anyway, the point is, I realized that once they arrested me on May 1st, the SBU, of course, confiscated my computers, and they got into all of my accounts, which they hadn't done before. Because what had happened was that one of the computers, I had left it in my motorcycle, and when they detained me that time, they hadn't realized that I had left it in my motorcycle, because, you know, it has these, I don't know if you can see them, it has these suckers, right? And so And that computer, that was my personal computer, with my personal, they're all personal computers, but I mean, with my personal information, including my accounts. And while I was in prison, the SBU looked through my accounts and they realized that I'm not poor. And so what happened was that they got the prisoners in CISO, in one of the 4 cells I was in, the last one, the worst one. It was 7 other prisoners and myself. And as soon as I arrived, they beat the shit out of me. And they tortured me that time. It started on June 21st at 1 p.m. and it lasted 30 hours. It included beatings, it included sleep deprivation. You know, I've been beaten up, so it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it's not fun. It hurts, yeah, sure. But, you know, when I was young, you know, yeah, I got into street fights and crap like that. And sometimes I won, and sometimes I got the shit kicked out of me. So the beatings I could handle, but when they started getting really, really pissed off at me, because I kept insisting that I was just a journalist and I didn't have a pot to piss in and I had no money and I could not get them $70,000, thinking that they'd lay off, thinking too and realizing too that extortionists, when you give in to them and you pay them, then they'll come back the next day and want more. And they'll beat you some more for more money, right? And so, of course, I denied the fact. I said I was just a poor writer, that I was living in Ukraine because it was so cheap and all the rest of it, you know. Poor me, I don't have a pot to piss in. But they knew, and they kept insisting. And a very specific number, 70,000. And what really unnerved me was that in the hour, maybe 25, 26, 2 of these thugs held my head, and one of them used a toothpick to scratch the whites of my left eye. And the other guy, the guy who actually spoke a little bit of English, said, "You can read with just one eye, right?" Not gonna lie, that really freaked me out. Anyway, after about 30 hours of this, I realized that there was no escape for me.
Okay, now he's talking about here that he's on the run and he's trying to seek asylum in Hungary.
My case originally started as a free speech issue. But because of the SBU and the inherent corruption of the SBU and the criminal justice system in Ukraine, I will definitely be sent to a prison labor camp where I will most certainly die. And so I decided that the smart thing was take my chances in terms of getting across the border. Right now, I'm maybe 5 kilometers away from the border with Hungary. Over the last 2 days, I rode my bike just about 1,300 kilometers from Kharkov all the way here to the border. And my intention is to cross the border, get to Hungary, and in Hungary, I'm going to ask for political asylum. Now, why Hungary? And why ask for political asylum? Very simple. You see, when I don't show up at my court date on Wednesday, the day after tomorrow, there will be an arrest warrant issued for me. Now, of course, this arrest warrant, they will presume that I left the country, so it will become an international arrest warrant. Now, the European Union, which is allied with Ukraine, to its perdition, as many of you know in terms of the European economies, well, the Europeans will comply with this international arrest warrant, and they will scoop me up at the first chance. And it won't matter that it's a free speech case. It won't matter, nothing will matter except complying. If I were to go to Poland or Slovenia or Romania, all of these little gremlins of the EU, they're going to scoop me up instantly and return me to the graces of the SBU and the criminal justice system, and eventually I'll wind up in a prison labor camp. I'm hoping that Hungary, which has shown some independence insofar as these matters are concerned, of complying with idiotic EU regulations and diktats, I'm hoping that the authorities in Hungary will look at my indictment, realize that it has nothing to do with me being an actual bona fide criminal in terms of harming people or property, and it's really a strictly free speech issue, an issue of democratic speech. And I'm hoping that the Hungarian authorities will show some mercy and some understanding and grant me this political asylum.
So at this point, we have not heard anything more from Gonzalo Lira. So he was about 3 miles away from the Hungarian border, and that was yesterday. And there's no update on whether or not he made it across the border or whether or not he was returned back to Ukraine. We've got no information on that at this point. I'm curious why he chose Hungary. Hungary is actually an EU nation. They've been in the EU since 2004. So they would be part of the West. They would be part of the, they would potentially have to comply. So I don't know why he didn't choose Belarus or Russia. It seems to me that if the Ukrainians are persecuting you for criticizing the war and for maybe even having some Russian-leaning viewpoints on that you would run off to Russia. That would be my thinking, that you would go to Russia, you'd go to Belarus at least. It seems like Belarus would be a safe choice. You know that you probably would get refuge there. They're not going to return you to Ukraine. And then from there, you can make your way as an American citizen through, I don't know where you could go in order to, if there's a return request, then I don't know where he can go except Russia. I mean, go live in Russia for a while. I mean, that's what I would think you would do. But so we'll find out hopefully we'll find out soon enough whether or not he made it, why. I would love to talk to him more about why he chose Hungary and not just go to Russia. What happened to his family? I know he has a wife and kids. A lot of questions, and right now no answers, but that is the update on what is going on with Gonzalo Lira, and we wish him the best. So get this, an NIH-funded study just vaccinated humans using genetically modified mosquitoes. If this doesn't freak you out, I don't know what will. This study took place recently in Seattle. A group of researchers were looking to see how they could vaccinate people from malaria using these mosquitoes. And what they did, this study involved 200 mosquitoes biting humans. And the humans would put their arms in the little whatever thing, and the mosquitoes would come and bite them. I don't know why anybody would sign up for that, but apparently participants were paid about $4,000 to do this, to be bitten by mosquitoes. The mosquitoes carried with them a modified version of malaria. And that modified version it's like really mild. It doesn't really actually make you sick. But the idea is that when you contract this really mild version of malaria from these mosquitoes, that you can't even feel, you're basically asymptomatic, you end up developing antibodies to malaria, and you're therefore then vaccinated against malaria. And in the study, they said that they used mosquitoes, and they actually did end up with 3 to 5 vaccinations over the 30-day intervals. And they said that the mosquitoes gave minor versions of malaria that didn't make people sick, but gave them the antibodies. And the efficacy from those antibodies last a few months. So it's not like long-term vaccination by any means. So like every few months, I guess you'd have to be bit by one of these mosquitoes. Now, when asked, they said, we used mosquitoes like they're 1,000 small flying syringes. But when asked, well, why didn't you just use syringes, right? Like, why don't you just inject people, with their consent? I mean, obviously in this study, the people gave consent, but what are you going to do with this science, with this research is the big question. So you're going to release mosquitoes out into the wild that carry this mild form of malaria so that you can give people malaria and vaccinate them without their consent. Essentially, a government, I could imagine, would buy the batch of genetically modified mosquitoes and release it to its population, which then what happens to mosquitoes? They get inside of crates, they get shipped around the world, they go with people places, they get transported. So now you're going to vaccinate the entire world without the world's consent by using this science. I mean, what is the purpose of this science if it's not for that? That's a really good question. And they said, well, the reason why we didn't use the syringes is because it just costs so much. They said that um, the researchers say genetically modified mosquitoes will not be used at large to vaccinate millions of people. They say, yeah, right. They say, oh, really? They told us that we wouldn't have mandates with the vaccines either, and yet we did. They said the reason why mosquitoes were used instead of syringes was to save cost. It's cheaper. So just use these genetically modified mosquito. Bull. If anybody's going to call bull on this, it's you and me, right? Because this is bull. They intend to use this science for something. What is it for? That is a good question. Dr. Kirsten Leik calls the research a total game changer. Excuse me. I have a mosquito in my throat. I'm being vaccinated. Help me. Dr. Kirsten Leik calls the research a total game changer. She led the phase 1 trials for Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine and was a co-investigator for Moderna and Novavax. So there you go. You've got COVID researchers saying, this is great. This is great. So be on the watch for, look, I never liked mosquitoes anyway, so now I'm going to be looking at those little flying suckers like, what you got? Is this a mandated vaccine? Because that's exactly what that would be. So be on the lookout. They're hopefully not out in the wild yet, but how do they know? This is like the lab leak. Did they account for every single mosquito? Did any of them escape from the lab by chance? It's the mosquito leak theory. All right, guys, let's talk about Field of Greens. I absolutely love this stuff. It is a fine powder made from dehydrated whole fruits and vegetables. They're carefully selected to give you the most nutrients in your diet. You just take a scoop of this powder, you mix it into your ice water, and it tastes delicious. It really does. A lot of green drinks, you're like, this stuff is actually really good. And it is a really easy way to get all of your fruits and vegetables into your diet. So if you're not getting enough of all of those colorful fruits and veggies that you're supposed to be eating every single day, which is really difficult, especially when you're on the go, this is a great way to get those in your system. I personally really like the lemon lime flavor. I also like the energy version. I've been using that one lately for working out. That one works really well. They also have a natural flavor. They also have a really great product called Lean on their site when you go there, and I like that one a lot as well. And that is just these little pills. They're highest quality ingredients, and they suppress your appetite. They boost up your metabolism. And those are really, really great. And they don't give you the jitters. At least they don't for me. And I'm very sensitive to that kind of stuff. So, Brick House has really high quality products. I really love their products. I've tried many of them and really, truly high quality stuff. So go to fieldofgreens.com, use the promo code Kim, and you're going to get 15% off your first order. Is artificial intelligence going to replace us? Some think there's a genuine risk of that. It's even why Andrew Yang proposed universal basic income during his presidential campaign, because many of us might find ourselves out of work, replaced by robots. It's perhaps why we will own nothing, and they claim we will be happy. But will we be? With us now is Joe Allen. He's the transhumanism editor for Bannon's War Room and author of the new book, Dark Aeon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity. Joe, who has a background in both science and theology, says good people are constructing a digital abomination, and though things are dire and terrifying, humanity's salvation is within our grasp. Joe, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Kim, thank you very much. My pleasure.
Okay, so you say that now some people might challenge you on the idea that good people are creating this abomination, because some people say, no, AI is being created by these tech billionaires like Bill Gates and Elon Musk, and we've got guys at the WEF who seem to be ushering this sort of transition into this new era upon us, and these are not good people. In fact, they have ulterior motives. What do you think about that? Why are they good people? Who are the good people?
Well, really, the good people, that quote actually comes from my experience at Boston University working with the Center for Mind and Culture. And these were very good people working on artificial intelligence models to model religious systems and also model people's behavior. I would consider them to be abominations on many levels, but these were good people with good intentions. You mentioned people like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, maybe implied there Klaus Schwab, you all know a Harari, Parag Khanna, people at the World Economic Forum. I am not the angel with the clipboard deciding who is and isn't evil. All you can do is judge by someone's actions or the intentions that they telegraph with their words. I will say this, though, that I do think that the idea that the benefit for humanity that is promised by the World Economic Forum comes at a great cost, a lot of that being one's freedom. And I also think that if you want to put Elon Musk as some sort of foil to those characters, whatever sorts of benefits he's offering comes at the cost of one's humanity. So it's really a deal with the devil either way.
In what way? So how does AI, and are you talking specifically about AI that would be sort of the deal with the devil that's going to cost us our humanity? What is it
So
exactly?
what I cover for the most part is transhumanism. Transhumanism is simply the philosophy that human beings can be optimized, that our abilities can and should be augmented by technology. And of course, a big part of that is the merging of human beings with machines at various levels. So when Klaus Schwab described the fourth industrial revolution, he defined it of one's physical, digital, and biological identities, or the convergence of the physical, digital, and biological worlds. This is the essence of transhumanism, even if he avoids using such a term. Same with Noah, Yuval Noah Harari's work, Homo Deus. It is simply describing transhumanism and posthumanism using new pop coinage. And Elon Musk, holding up artificial intelligence as this tremendous danger, this existential risk that threatens humanity, while at the same time creating artificial intelligence systems. In fact, Tesla has some of the most advanced artificial intelligence systems in the world. And of course, XAI, their intention is to create artificial general intelligence, meaning some sort of superhuman godlike AI. And part of his solution to this existential risk of artificial intelligence, which he is in fact creating, is to use devices such as the Neuralink to merge one's brain. He calls it the intended end product, a whole brain interface that could reach every part of your mind and both read and write onto it. That's the intention. Musk is known for overpromising. All of these technologies are rife with overhype. But the real argument that I make continuously is that the impact of this, the import of this, is that we are being conditioned as the various societies across the world, individuals, and most importantly, civilizationally. Whole civilizations are having their attention directed towards technology as the salvific or transcendent principle. I would say that transhumanism represents a sort of religion of technology, as David Noble would say, and that it is, in fact, one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing religions, and it's a religion that has suffused the most powerful corporations on earth.
Why do you think it's like a religion? Because I've seen like people on the left, for example, during the pandemic, sort of grasped what seemed like religion when it came to the vaccines and there's like a morality, and it was around morality. It was like, do this or else you're a bad person. But I don't know if I see that with tech so much. I don't think I see groups of people saying, embrace tech or you're a bad person. But I do see that with other things.
That is, vaccines are technology. First off, as are masks, really kind of low grade technical device. Also, the contact tracing systems that were rolled out during the pandemic or the pandemic response, those are obviously advanced technologies used for
Okay.
surveillance. And one who, it is, especially in places like, say, Israel, where you had real, those sorts of technologies were pushed, or Singapore, they were pushed more aggressively. You were certainly considered to be a bad person for not subjecting yourself to it. In general, I think that most of the technologies we consider to be invasive, such as or people like myself and other quasi Luddites, such as a smartphone, uh, more and more, I mean, obviously in America right now, it's a matter of personal choice. In China, it's a matter of mandate. In fact, oftentimes you're considered a person of interest if you're stopped by the police and you do not have your smartphone on you. So
Mm.
the idea that the same sort of impulse that you're talking about that appeared during the pandemic, that one is not normal unless they are in some way augmented by the biomedical system, that underpins much of what I would call transhumanism or its broader social expression, technocracy, two different things, but very much connected. And the religion element, I think that if you look at my writing and the reporting that we've done at the War Room for the last 2.5 years, a lot of it is my interpretation of it as a replacement for religion, but a lot of it is the self description of those working on this. They see it as a spiritual quest. Sam Altman speaks of it this way. If you look at the writings of some of the newer, more radical thinkers, people like the effective accelerationists, they describe it as a spiritual quest. Ben Goertzel, known for building the AI behind the popular Sophia robot, very famous kind of figurehead for transhumanism, describes it in Buddhist terms. His colleague Hugo de Garis openly describes the creation of what he calls artilects, or what we would call artificial general intelligence, as a religious impulse. So there's no question that this is not simply me projecting that onto them, even if oftentimes it's part of my analysis of it. If I could say one quick thing, Kim, about that too, in the cognitive science of religion, which I think is very informative, even if it's somewhat deadening as a philosophy, in the cognitive science of religion, it's talked about continually that in a kind of post-traditional age, in an age of secularism, what we see again and again and again is that the cognitive machinery of the mind that typically would have been harnessed by religion or harnessed religious ideas, or those mechanisms, those psychological mechanisms, are now occupied by more secular, atheistic, and increasingly technological means, so to speak. So that's a real element of it too. I think that the religion of technology, again, as David Noble would describe it, the religion of technology is simply sliding into the vacuum that atheism has opened up.
What do you think the future looks like? I mean, you make a really good argument, and then I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, I mean, what if everything does? I mean, if are we really at risk of being replaced by robots? Do you think that humans really could become second-class citizens on Earth, and that robots figure out not only how to replace us, but then they can build more robots? I mean, robots should be able to build other robots, would be my guess at some point, right? AI would be able to replace and almost like procreate itself. So where do you see us headed?
That's certainly the intended trajectory of a lot of these people. For me, I think that it will be something very different than anyone expects, because the future almost always is. But you can get some idea of the general contours. When people say, I want to create godlike artificial intelligence that should be deferred to in place of human judgment and human wisdom, you can be sure that they're going to work on and develop some kind of system that will take precedence over certain humans' decisions. When people say, I want to create robots to pretty much do any menial labor, such as Elon Musk with his robot Optimus, it's not clear whether or not he will be completely successful in that, but you can be sure that his projects will move towards replacing some blue collar workers. And definitely when you look at Chat GPT or other large language models, the sort of language based AIs, I think that the intention, the signaled intention to replace uh, journalists, teachers, doctors, lawyers, whether or not that happens in some sort of totalizing sense, that the future is unknown. Is the end result of these technologies? That's all unknown. But what we do know is that is their intention. And so, to some extent, to the extent these technologies can be developed or already have been developed, you can be sure that some human beings are definitely to be replaced and are being replaced right now. One of
Yeah.
the more disturbing things that I see is this push. I think it's great, the push towards homeschooling, and I think it's very understandable in the current climate. But alongside that is this push for one-on-one AI tutoring. And this is not just some kind of left-wing thing. In fact, one of the arguments I make continually is that this is not transhumanism, techno fetishism, futurism, even posthumanism. This isn't some sort of left wing thing. It's not some sort of globalist thing. The tendency for human beings to elevate technology as the highest power on earth is beyond any ideology. And so we hear a lot of mothers, and I think that it's to me another one of those pacts with the digital devil, talking about educating their children using AI technologies that will completely transform the way in which culture is transmitted from generation to generation. One last point on that, looking at the future, I think that all of these technologies are undoubtedly going to have tremendous impacts, but they're not going to have impacts across the board. It won't be uniform. It will be unevenly distributed, just as it is now. And so you will have some portions of society that stay behind, so to speak, some portions of society wherein the infrastructure continues to crumble and poverty is something that could kill you. And then on the other hand, I think that you're going to see other sectors, particularly among the elites and those who have signed on to the sorts of agendas at the World Economic Forum, they will rush full on ahead with this, and they will adopt these technologies as much as possible, as much as they seem useful, which I think will be quite a bit. So one of the things that Hugo de Garis talks about, and he himself is a transhumanist, he himself built robots, and he talks about this sort of separation between those who, I will call them cyborgs, he would maybe describe it differently, but those who have attached themselves to the technologies, who are altering their bodies by way of advanced technology, be it phenotypic or genotypic, those who have pretty much resigned themselves to the idea that artificial intelligence is superior, and then those who have not, and that they will basically function like two different races, or they will function like two completely different species. And this is certainly, he's not alone in that projection. I am not the only lunatic who thinks that something like that could be possible. And I also think that the ideology behind it, whether or not it's actually some sort of biological speciation, there is already a cultural speciation between, say, first world countries and third world countries, or what you would say would be civilized peoples and savage peoples. And that divide is significant enough that throughout the last 3 centuries, we saw that the civilized peoples completely eradicated the third world people with fairly primitive technologies compared to what we have today. So I anticipate that if these technologies move forward, that something like the darkest predictions that are made both by those who are kind of Luddites and fearful and by those who want to see this go forward, I think something like that is very, very likely to come to pass. It will be a dark eon, so to speak.
I mean, you bring up some really great points that I'd never really thought about before. The fact that, yeah, there are some ideas out there, people pushing for AI to replace human decision making and allowing the AI to be the ultimate decider. I mean, they think, some people imagine a world where they're judges, and it's like, oh, well, then we don't have the bias of a judge if you go up in front of AI, and then AI decides your fate. I mean, that is putting an immense amount of power in the hands of a robot, in the hands of technology. And it is putting them godlike, above the human, telling the human, this is what's going to happen to you. This is your future now. And AI decides that rather than humans. And there's definitely a push for that, because there's definitely a faction of people, and I believe it as well, that there are serious bias in the court systems. And, we see it every day in the news. The DOJ is going one way, or and so there could be this push coming from both sides, actually, to, well, let's let AI decide, and then we won't have all of this partisan, back and forth civil war that we're almost reeling into. So that's really frightening when you put it in the perspective of, now we're putting AI above humans, and there's going to be a push for that. And people are going to be championing that. They're going to want that. That is really frightening. It's also really scary when you think about the fact that, the population is growing. The Earth's population is just growing and growing. And so if there is AI that replaces many of the jobs, what does happen? And you're right, when it's the lowest on the totem pole, rather than the conquerors, the first world people going after the third world and conquering in the olden sense, where they'd maybe land on their shores and eradicate them somehow through warfare, there would be a different way of going about that potentially. Like maybe, just, not having it, you'd kind of whittle away When people don't have any purpose in life, when they don't have a job, when they don't know what their being is about, we see them reel into degeneracy, essentially, right? We see them go into crime, drugs, alcohol. They got nothing else to do but just drink their sorrows away and commit crime. And then that would be a way to essentially eradicate the lowest of the low, throw them in jail, don't allow them to, to have resources. They die off. I mean, that's just really dystopian. I mean, when you bring all this up, this is frightening. So, okay, you've got this book coming out at the end of the month, at the end of this month, Dark Eon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity. Do you give us hope? Are you going to give us hope on how we can fight back?
There is there's a light at the end of that tunnel. Yes. I think also that look at all the struggles that people have gone through, our ancestors have gone through, other people's ancestors have gone through over the course of history, going back to the caves. We have always faced horrific challenges. So whether one is excited about these technologies, optimistic about them, wants to adopt them as rapidly as possible, and become something like this 21st century future man, or whether one wants to remain something like a human being, I think that whatever side you stand on, that you can't look at the future with a paralyzing fear. You have to go forward with the attitude that you and your values and your intentions and your will win the day. Doesn't necessarily mean that's going to happen, but I also don't think that the extreme predictions of these technologists are necessarily going to come to pass. And if they do, they won't necessarily come to pass in a universal fashion so that every single person is somehow forced to adopt it. We'll see. In a place like China, you see adoption of various technologies like this, that they are mandated and they're used for social control. In America, the flavor is a bit different, but the same temptations to use these technologies for psychological control, population control, it's here too. It's happening here too. So I think that human freedom is really the central value that I'm championing, even if I'm not pushing it as some sort of libertarian, which I'm not. I think that human freedom in the face of these smothering technologies has to be preserved. It has to be carried forward like a torch in a storm. And hopefully I provide some tools and a bit of a roadmap for people who might not know about some of these technologies, or if they do, might not be aware of the philosophical and even religious intentions that really ride behind them. And that goes from Google to Facebook to Elon Musk's endeavors, and of course the World Economic Forum as a kind of mouthpiece for these people.
Well, you brought up some really good points. So definitely, I know you're an expert in transhumanism, and I do think people need to pay more attention to this because this could be the future warfare that we're fighting as humans, not against one another, but sort of against one another. Those who want to develop this and force it on us, and those of us who want to retain our humanity. So thank you so much, Joe, for being here. The link to his book is down below, and you can pre-order it. Dark Eon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity. Joe Allen, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kim.
All right, guys, that is it for tonight's show. Thank you so much for joining me. We will be back tomorrow night with another great show. Tomorrow's Wednesday, right? Yeah. I've got my days mixed up. But we will be back tomorrow night with another great show, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. You can count on that. Thank you so much for being here. Email me any of your thoughts, your questions. If you have any guest ideas or topic ideas, or you just want to give me your ideas on things that I've said tonight or the guest has said tonight, you want to disagree, agree, whatever. I love hearing from you. My email address is kim@kimiverson.com. That is how you can reach me. Otherwise, guys, we will be, and I do read all my emails, by the way. We'll be back tomorrow night. Another great show, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. Good night.